Okay, we are going to call to order the Town of Telluride, Colorado Special Town Council meeting. It is Tuesday, October 28th, 2025. It is 10:02 a.m. and we are in person at Rebecca Hall, 113 West Columbia Avenue, as well as hybrid and online. Next item on the agenda is roll call. And to my right,
Ellen 11.
Me and Fee.
Ashley Von Sprecken.
Dan Enright.
and Teddy Erico as mayor. We are expecting Geneva Shawnette to arrive within the half hour. And that brings us to agenda item 1A, action item, introduction and first reading of an ordinance of the Town Council of the Town of Telluride, Colorado, authorizing the sale of certain deed restricted real property known as Silver Jack Unit 305, and we have Allie Slayton to present.
Thank you, Mayor Erico. So the purpose of this item today is so we can start moving on the process of selling Silverjack 305. Just a little bit of background on this unit. It is a guideline subject deed restricted unit, and that is not going to change through this transaction. It was previously owned and occupied by a town employee. On May 13th of this year, the town decided to repurchase this unit so that it could continue to be owned by a town employee rather than subjected to the lottery. The town did close on the unit on June 23rd, and we are now under contract with another town employee to sell this unit to that person, contingent upon, of course, passage of an ordinance, as well as receipt of exceptions, which are anticipated to be heard next Wednesday at the SMRA or at the THA subcommittee meeting. So pursuant to section 4.9 of the Home Rule Charter, we do have to dispose of property, real property, by ordinance. So this is just the first reading and introduction of this ordinance. A public hearing would happen at the November meeting.
Great. Allie, thank you very much. Are there any questions on council? I know this has come up before and we kind of knew the roadmap from a while back. But are there any questions from council for Allie? Seeing no questions and that this is an action item, is there anybody in the room to comment on this agenda item? Seeing none. Tiffany, do we have any hands raised? Seeing none. Great. Unless there's any further discussion from staff or council on this item, I would entertain a motion.
I move to approve on first reading an ordinance of the Town Council of the Town of Telluride, Colorado, authorizing the sale of Silverjack 305 and direct the town clerk to set this matter for a public hearing on second reading of the same to be held on November 25th, 2025.
Second.
We have a motion from Mian and a second from Dan. Mian, how do you vote?
Me and yes.
Dan, yes.
Ellen, yes.
Ashley, yes.
And Teddy, yes, it is approved unanimously. Allie, thank you very much. That brings us to action item 1B, consideration of support for Town of Telluride's application to the Colorado Energy Office Impact Accelerator Grant Program. And we have Darren Graver here to present.
Thank you, Mayor, Town Council. Yes, so like a lot of grant programs, this one has a really long name, but these funds were originally awarded to the Colorado Energy Office through the EPA. The grant has been renamed, but it's been on our radar really since I've been here with town because it's a substantial source of potential funding, and it was aimed at programs and policies that would reduce greenhouse gas emissions at the local level in a durable way. So what we are targeting, and you'll see the letter that I drafted. What we are targeting is our buildings energy sector, as I always remind everyone, is our biggest source of GHG emissions in this community. And we've been talking a lot about building codes recently, and those are pretty complementary projects to this project. So what we're hoping to apply and ask for funding for is to develop a policy for building performance standards, which would involve a community buildings benchmarking effort, which is a pretty substantial effort. And there are other peer communities around the state doing these kind of programs now that we can take good lessons from. But the funding that is available through this program is so substantial, I think it could really be a way to get us kickstarted on this effort. So I'm happy to speak at more level of detail if there are questions. But this is really in line with our 2022 climate action plan and the 2026 goal and objective to look at a community-wide building energy retrofit program, which is the highest impact strategy in the climate action plan in terms of GHG reduction. So Just to give a ballpark figure on what amount of money could be available, this energy office is requesting 3 different levels of budget. The lowest level is $500,000 and the highest level is up to 5 million. There's a lot of interest, so they're telling everyone to not expect the highest level. The sort of standard budget level would be up to 2 million. So it's a pretty substantial source of funding that we have a chance to go for.
Great, Darren, thank you very much. Any questions for Darren on this application?
Seems like an easy win with very little downside potential. So, yep.
Great. Yep, I reviewed the letter with him in advance and I'm full agreement. This is an action item. So is there anybody in the room to discuss the application to the Colorado Energy Office Impact Accelerator Grant Program? Seeing none, we'll double check online. Being none, unless there's any further discussion on this action item, I would entertain a motion.
I move to approve a letter of support for the town of Telluride's application to the Colorado Energy Office Impact Accelerator Grant Program as presented.
A second.
We have a motion from Mian and a second from Dan. Mian, how do you vote?
And yes.
Elena, yes.
Ashley, yes.
Teddy, yes, it is approved unanimously and God bless you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Aaron, thank you so much. That brings us to agenda item 2A, work sessions, discussion on the implementation of the rental housing policies. And we have Delaney, we have Ally, and we have Hayden all in the hot seats.
Thank you, Mayor Errico. This item comes forward before Town Council and the THA Board after discussions which occurred at the budget meetings, which have been ongoing over the last few weeks. The purpose of this meeting today is really to take a look at the policies and see where we can do some tweaks just as an interim solution to some of the complaints that we've heard from current tenants and prospective tenants. So the purpose of today's meeting is pretty tailored narrowly just to these 4 major changes that were previously proposed by the board. This meeting is not intended to fundamentally alter the policy document or the policy decisions that were previously made. We are going to go into more depth into a policy review next year. But right now, what we're trying to do is just address the most immediate concerns. So with that, there are some bullet points in the staff memo that I have presented along with a comprehensive red line attached to that staff memo. Just like when we revised the guidelines through the guidelines process, attached to the resolution, which would achieve these changes today, is a clean version. So what you'll notice in the staff memo, there are bullet points. And the first bullet point is permitting master leases at the boarding house. This was an item which I believe was discussed at some of the budget meetings in which Delaney is going to talk about a little bit more. You had previously decided when you formed the rental policies last year to prohibit master leases across the board for all properties. However, Delaney is going to speak on this just as to opening that up to the boarding house only, just based on the nature of how that property operates and its seasonal nature. It would help with the budget for that property just to open up certain units to a lottery process and would also assist some local businesses that have very seasonal employees. So that's the first major change that we are proposing today. The second major change is the second bullet point, which is to increase the minimum rent tier for Voodoo from tier C up to tier D. And I believe that was also something that was previously discussed, and Delaney will go into more detail. These next 2 bullet points are, they're more just clarifications to be made. Removing the mental health worker reserved unit from Voodoo was something that you had already authorized. So that's just cleanup, that this would be a good opportunity to go ahead and remove that from the policies. The next bullet point to update the AMI tables for the AMI released in April 2025, which would be effective for the policies on January 26th. That's something that the policies already requires us to do, but this is a good opportunity for us to go ahead and insert those numbers. So again, I don't see that as that's not a change. That's something that we're already supposed to be doing. But with this new version, we would have those numbers in there for anyone to reference. So that's also more of a cleanup item. The next bullet point, though, is our third major change that we are proposing, which is amending the rental affordability multipliers from 27% down to 25% at Shandoka and from 30% down to 27% for all other projects. I think we've already discussed at some of those budget meetings why this number would help tenants, even though AMI is rising approximately 9%. But again, Delaney will go into more detail there. The fourth major change that we are proposing is inserting the unit amenities multiplier, which was previously authorized to be used by staff, but it was not memorialized in these policies. So in the interest of transparency, we have written down what those numbers are. We have put them in the policies. That way, if anyone has any question about how their rent is determined based on their unit size, then that is all in there. The policies are fully transparent. And this last bullet point is just another cleanup item, which is to update the rental unit inventory. We expect an imminent completion of Shandoka Phase 2 pretty soon. So I went ahead and included those numbers in our appendices just to reflect those units and update our unit count. So that's just a high-level overview of what we're going to go into today, but I wanted to give you like I said, just an update as to what we're going to talk about. And we can either take these one at a time, starting at the top, or if there's anywhere else that you think would be better to start, we can do so. I know that you've already discussed some of these a little bit, so maybe not all of them need to be discussed in depth. The one that I need the most answers for is the first one, which is permitting master leases at the boarding house, just because with that, opening that door, there are a lot of parameters that we need to delineate, and I need feedback from you as to how you would like to see us operate that program.
Great. Unless anyone on council objects, I think we just go right in order.
Great. So the master leases, this would amend section 106.4 and 707.2. And I will find those. The 106.4 is on page 11 of the rental policies themselves. And I apologize, my version did not print the packet number. But all this does is add a sentence because we have an explicit prohibition on master leases in the policies right now. So this first change, all it does is authorize master leases, again, at the boarding house only. If it's something that you would like to see in the future expanded to other properties, then ideally we could take what we've learned through master leases at the boarding house and probably come forward with the same program plus changes at that time.
And it's page 21 of the packet. You haven't found it yet.
But the real changes come in at 707.2. And this is page 26 of the policies.
We just go through the bullet points first.
Yeah, we can. So 707.2 is where I've already answered these questions based on what staff is suggesting. But any of these numbers can be amended. This was just a first pass at outlining what the program should look like. But any of the details can be amended as you see necessary. So for instance, I put in just a lottery point system for qualified businesses. I went ahead and defined what a qualified business would be. I put a cap on the total number of leases that any one qualified business could have at any one point in time. But if you don't like any of these proposed policies, if you think the numbers on any of these should change, that's what we're here to discuss.
I just have a really small one.
Mhm.
Is in that very first section, it says after the 2-year term, each unit will be re-entered into the master lease lottery for the next term. I would prefer if that said a may, because we're talking about a maximum number of the double occupancy and then single occupancy. If there's a situation where a master lease unit, there's a different opportunity that unit needs to be utilized for. I don't want it to have to automatically be put back into that master lease program if a future council decides that that's something that they want out.
Okay.
That's just a small one.
I wanted to talk a little bit about just like the maximum units that we're setting aside for this. Like it's almost half of the boarding house. I wonder if that is too much. And I know we're doing this because, or actually remind me, we're doing this because we've had some vacancies in the boarding house. Is that correct?
Yes, it's a little more expansive than that. The nature of the boarding house, that it is. We back up even further. During the policy discussions prior to adoption on November 19, 2024, one of the directions we were given was to bring the boarding house back to its original intention, which is seasonal workforce housing, because that was the original intention. There's a demand in the community for that. For reasons that are somewhat tied to COVID, people moved in and they haven't left. We have some tenants who've been in there for more than 3.5 years. And we were directed to get it back to its original intention, and we're doing our best to do that without actually forcing anyone out. We're offering them single occupancy units when they come available. So that's kind of where we started with this. The nature of that building, when it is used as it is supposed to be seasonally, means that there are vacant units for anywhere from 2 to 4 months, because it depends where the person is working and when they are done working and go back to wherever they were before. And part of this is to, as Ally said, I would speak a bit to the budget piece, and happy to have Hayden jump in on this as well, because he was part of those discussions, or Zoe. This is an attempt to help reduce and offset the revenue loss. Master leases mean that the units would be rented year round and be utilized for the intended purpose, which is the seasonality of the workforce that it was built to provide housing for.
I guess the thing is, it's like, then in order for it to provide for the seasonality of the workforce, then you would also have to require those employers to be having seasonally employed people living there, correct? That they wouldn't just be occupying it for 2 years?
I guess that's what we're here to find out from all of you. I can give you two anecdotal examples. It's the ones that we know of. There's an employer in town who would be interested in this program. They hire people literally seasonally, summer season, winter season, so that would remain. We have another employer in town who has expressed interest, who, while they hire people who may be seasonal, they may have them for a full year in this position, and potentially even up to the 2 years. I think that is one of the nuances that the way Ally, the language that is proposed, I think would allow for that, but I think that finite time would then be the 2 years. If I read it correctly.
And so, I mean, I think we almost have to figure out what our definition of seasonality is, because we don't really, if it's, to me, seasonality means Thanksgiving till April 1st and Memorial Day till mid-October.
I don't think we have an
But-
issue with that.
Yeah, but the bottom line is that we're saying we want it seasonal, but we may, here's my concern, is that we want it seasonal, but we're going to make an employer pay for it for 12 months a year. So to me, it's just, if you're going to do the master lease, you just rent it to them and let them do what they want with it within that time frame. And they have per the policy, between 3 months of a sublease and 24 months of a sublease. And if it's seasonal, great. If it's person's in there year round, to me, great. I mean,
Then why bother doing it? Because you could rent to an individual in the same way. You could rent to an individual you can offer shorter term leases for 4 to 6 months. And then you can also offer year leases. I guess that's where
it's less work for staff, and it guarantees us the payment as well.
Well,
I'm not sure it's the right thing to do, but
And this is what I wanted to bring up, because I don't really see people continuing to stay in the boarding house who are otherwise qualified as a bad thing. It's a little different than the original idea behind why we created it, but I think as we continue to see, there's demand for many different types of housing arrangements at different price levels and different configurations. And if it's working for otherwise qualified workers of Telluride, that to me seems okay. We prohibit master leases and other elements of our housing programs for a very good reason in my mind, is that it keeps the power in the hands of the worker, where their housing is not intrinsically tied to that one specific job, which is how this would be. And it allows people to make the choice that's right for them and find the right job for them without having to worry about reconfiguring your entire life and losing your housing potentially. So I'm skeptical of the need for this change. And I I don't, as we've stated, other points in other conversations around housing policy, our affordable housing isn't a business where we're trying to maximize everything perfectly necessarily. It's first and foremost a service to our community. And I think we're sort of getting away from that intention with this. I could allow it potentially for a small portion, sort of as a pilot program. I know there is demand from the business community for it, but I still want to focus first and foremost on serving the workforce, the people.
I just want to make sure I'm reading it correctly that, and I know that lease term could be 3 to 24 months, right, for the sublease.
For the subtenant.
For the
So
subtenant, right.
our leases with the business would either be for 1 year or for 2 years. And you're absolutely right, Teddy. The intent behind it is to reduce rent loss by THA by having a tenant, the business in there for a 1 year or 2 year period rather than a seasonal employee in there for only 3 months or 6 months.
And workload. But the
Mhm.
question becomes, to Dan's point that I want to clarify is once that subtenant, the employee of the master lease, signs that lease, he stays in for the lease length, no matter if he gets fired or quits, right?
So I did put in here that protection for employees. So if he gets fired or he quits, that cannot be a material provision of the lease, which would trigger termination of the sublease. So they would be able to maintain that lease for whatever lease period they have under the sublease.
But
So
only-
if it's only, yes, so if it's only a 3 month, so our term will be 1 year or 2 year with the business. Their term with their subtenant could be 3 months up to 2 years or whatever the remainder of their master lease with us is. So it's really up to them to determine how seasonal this employee is. Maybe it's a manager who they do want to house for a full 2 years. Maybe it's a cashier that they only know will be there for 3 or 4 months at a time. And then that person's going to leave for a couple of months and then maybe they'll come back. Whatever that lease term is what that subtenant will be entitled to stay there for.
I want to
Got
add
it.
one clarifying piece. If it's their job with the guarantor, the leaseholder, they still have to be qualified, which means they would have to provide paperwork to us that they're still
They got
getting
another job.
employed somewhere
Yep.
else, just making sure that's understood.
Mian?
Can you speak to why we set that 3-month lease term? Just because based on sort of the seasonality that I see, like it would be, I mean, unless we're specifically trying to, I mean, you've gotten feedback from people that are looking for visa specific temporary roles.
So there's very few that only are 3 months long. In the history of the boarding house, there have been a few instances, and the one that comes to mind, sorry, I have to name drop, is Telluride Academy. Because it is just those very finite weeks in the summertime, that's when their programs run. Most others are 4 months at minimum, just by the nature of how long somebody is here working for the season, whether it's for, I won't say any more business names, so.
Right. I mean, I think, and that's sort of, thank you for the Telluride Academy example, because that helps clarify something. But I think, elsewhere in the region, we have seen deed restricted housing managed or owned by businesses and sit empty. And so I'd like there to be a requirement provision that during season, these units have got to be filled with people, not just that they're paying for it, but that there are legitimate bodies in those rooms, and workers that are being housed, because otherwise we're doing a disservice, to Dan's point, to the workforce that's here.
I anticipated putting in the lease itself a 30 or 60-day provision for vacancy, because remember, the reason we're doing this is because we're going to have vacancy either way, but at least this way we're getting paid for that vacancy by the business.
I mean, I don't know if what rest of council feels, but if we ultimately go this direction, can we put a penalty in if it's vacant for more than 30 days? I mean, we want them,
Just
It
make-
terminates the lease.
Yeah, I think a prohibition, like, yeah. you
right,
lose the
something,
lease.
right? Like it, it has to, you have to use it. And we get that turnover is not easy on dates and a 30-day is great. But if you don't fill it after 30, whether it's a penalty, like the easy thing on the penalty is they pay us a little more money, it gives them incentive to fill it. And it's less, not only is it less work for staff, but it's also to get the guaranteed money that we get still remains. I don't really care either way, but I just want to bring up that point.
30, 45, or 60-day vacancy, what do you think is most reasonable given the length of our off seasons?
And I would not recommend 30 simply because of
Odd.
one of the employers that is interested. I'm gonna throw dates out. They don't technically start until sometimes December 10th.
Right.
And so it could be empty from end of September to December 10th. I wouldn't want it to be, but that's how their program works. So just, I would say not 30 for sure.
I mean, I think calling it maybe like setting season makes as part of this too. I mean, I know that makes it a little bit more complicated, but I think that at least recognizes that we understand that these are seasonal jobs by nature. So if we have language that says like, you know, we anticipate that season starts on this date and ends on this day, you know, whatever it could potentially be. And, you know, then it can't be, I would probably say, my lean is 45 days personally, because I think that also if you're putting an employee in and you're switching them, if they're switching housing, like they need to be able to move, they need the time to be able to like make that adjustment from like one unit to another too. So terminate their own lease.
We haven't heard from Eleni yet. so-
Yeah. This is not, I've had some things to say that aren't about this, but I want to comment about this too. I also would like to see it be like, it can only be like vacant for a cumulative amount per year. Like, it's not like you get 3 months on, 2 months empty, 3 months on, 2 months empty. Like you can only, I don't know what that maximum is, but I think we should have something in there that keeps it from being empty for too many chunks of time throughout the year, not just the length of the chunk. You know what I mean? But I did want to say, we reference master leases for businesses, but I feel like if we can change all of that verbiage to businesses and organizations, because not every, like the Med Center, nonprofits, not traditional businesses, but organizations also that I think should be allowed to apply for this. And I think that the amount of units that we're setting aside from this feels high. Like I'm kind of with Dan that I would rather see it as a little bit more of like a softer lean into this, and then we can see how it goes and decide if we want to do more. But I think this like initial launch of almost half the building feels like a little aggressive, and I would support kind of lowering that amount.
Ashley and then me.
So, I'm just gonna kind of run through what I'm feeling. I think that the penalty is not a big enough incentive for businesses not to take the vacancy issue seriously. And I think that it needs to result in a termination of a lease. That's just where I am landing on that. I think that rather than trying to do the like amount of time it's empty and trying to work that in also with the off seasons, I think we just say that like I feel like we need to like do like a combination of the two, like saying that during, like Mian says, we know when the seasons begin and end with a slight twinge gray area on a little spaces, but we can just say, we believe that the winter season starts this date, ends this date, the summer season starts this date, ends this date. I don't think that we would take into account vacancies during the off season, because the idea being that this is supposed to be seasonal housing, and so that there should be turnover during those seasonal times. Ideally, if we're actually leaning into that idea about the definition of the boarding house. But then during the on seasons, I don't think that they should be allowed to have more than 45 days of the unit be vacant. If that happens and they're unable to fill it, then it just their lease will end, and then it goes back into the regular pool, whether that's the lottery pool or the rental. That's what I kind of feel about it. And I also agree that since this is our, we said I think all of us pretty much agreed that we didn't want to have master leases. I agree that we need to start with a smaller number of them here to see how it goes. I think that I agree with the number of them that are being introduced in this initially seems high.
I think you like sparked a thought in my head. I think that because there's some seasonal jobs like construction workers, landscapers that don't fall within like the kind of festival to skiing like transition. And so I don't want to write policy that leaves out other types of seasonality. But what if we, instead of saying like, you know, this like 45-day period or whatever, what if we just say it has to be occupied for 75% of the master lease time?
That's what I was thinking. We could have,
So that way-
it allows flexibility for businesses, and maybe we say that the unit is permitted to be vacant for 90 days out of a calendar year or 120 days, whatever you think is reasonable.
75% of the lease term, because that way it
Mhm.
applies to 1-year leases, it applies to 2-year leases, it can be flexible. So it kind of gives you essentially 2 45-day periods in a year, and you can use them wherever it makes sense in the calendar. So we're not like prescribing what the best dates are. The other thing I wanted to say is like, do we want to consider opening up this master lease program to subleasing, like this might be a terrible idea, but outside of their employee base, if they don't, well, no, then they should just lose the lease though.
They're allowed to. So the
Okay.
business, so long
Okay.
as the occupant is a qualified household, they can rent to their own employee. They could rent to someone else's employee. If
Okay.
they, in reality, I think if they were not housing their own employees and weren't anticipating to house their own employees, I think they would just release the lease because there's no value in the sublease if they're not going to use it, because they can't sublease it to another business or to another tenant for more than what we charge under the master lease. So
Right.
they can't make money off of this.
Yeah. I mean, I could see like an advantage if an organization was able to get it who had a really busy winter season and then
Mhm.
reached out to Telluride Academy and was like, we don't do anything in the summer. Do you have people? Like
Yeah.
that seems like a good,
And that would be permitted.
okay, cool.
Mhm.
I just want to go on there. I do believe that master leases are a good idea for businesses. I know that, I think I was the lone dissenting voice on council that said that, but I think that this allows for businesses to be a lot more strategic in growth and be able to actually provide for their employees. And I think that that's really important. I did, I think as far as like the language of the number of units, to the point that Elena brought up, I think that the language is fine with the number of units, but I would actually like to start the program smaller. So I would like to give you the flexibility if we see that there is significant interest to be able to increase past like 5 units or whatever it could potentially be. But I would like this to start smaller, but I want to give you the space in the policies to be able to be flexible up to the number that that you kind of called out here, if that makes sense. And then the other thing that I would like to see with this is that I would like this to be specific to Telluride, town of Telluride businesses and organizations, not regional, right now. I think that,
Doesn't it say they have to have a town of Telluride business license?
That can be many things, so
yeah,
I don't want to leave out the med center. That's like
but organizations, that's
the
business-
organization.
businesses
Like
and
they physically have
organizations.
to be in the town of Telluride, not just a business license.
Yes.
Because if like hypothetically, if the med center were to relocate outside of town, they would not be in this bucket then?
We can amend that policy as needed.
And again, like we're starting this, but I think, we've regionally, I feel like we've seen some challenges with some businesses and master leases, and I would like to ensure that this program is successful. And I think the way that is best for us to do that is to keep it confined to the town of Telluride, beyond the fact that I also think that there is a corollary between generating services for the community here in Telluride, as well as being the businesses that are generating the tax revenue that's paying for this housing. Like, I think that I would like to serve our businesses first and foremost with this.
Dan, hang on one second. Tiffany, did you have your hand up?
So I wanted to remind council that a lot of nonprofits are exempt from business licensing requirements. So a lot of our local nonprofits don't have a town of Telluride business license.
I thought we already said we were gonna add organizations.
So
Yeah, I think the qualifier we understand the intent, so the qualifier might not necessarily hold on a Telluride business license, but maybe a Telluride business address that they can confirm or something along those lines.
So let's, if you don't mind, if we can go just down the bullet list, because I think we're jumping.
Let's hear
Okay,
from
yeah,
Dan
okay.
first real quick, and then we'll do that.
Because I do have to disagree with Mian. I understand where you're coming from. I get some of that sentiment, but I think what you're talking about is a major philosophical shift. And if we start playing that what's ours is ours game with our regional partners, that to me feels like a slippery slope. And it feels like we just are entering a less sort of collaborative regional mindset. And I am not prepared to start playing that game with our regional partners. I understand the need to try to take care of Telluride, but if we start playing that game, Mountain Village can start doing it to us, and so can the county. And I don't think that's going to benefit our citizens or our region.
I think that's a valid point. I think philosophically, I believe this is something that we should be doing. You know, obviously, yes, there's a financial component from the town's perspective, but philosophically, like this is to support our small businesses. Would you be amenable to an employee cap? You know, that if you have more than that, this is a program, a test program for businesses that have less than 150 employees?
Or how about an extra lottery entry? If you're physically in the town.
Something on an employee cap, like you're saying, sure, I could get it. If it's below 150 businesses, I could get on board with that.
15 employees.
150 employees. Thank you. Sure. That feels more amenable to me. That if we're focusing on small businesses and nonprofits, organizations, okay.
Why are we
I-
focusing on small businesses with this? Just out of curiosity, because I didn't see it that way. I thought this was more of like, I don't know if that actually helps the employee housing program to limit it to just small businesses. Like, yes, I want to take care of our small businesses, and I also want to take care of our big economic drivers who need housing for their employees. And I mean, I feel like this is like a little off brand for me, but I almost feel the opposite, that I think it would do a disservice to the philosophy of why we're doing this, to limit it to only small businesses.
I think it would be I agree with Elena in a way, because I feel like it would be less effective, because the idea would be that you have a business that has, 20 employees coming in for the winter season. I'm using the seasons. I know there are other businesses that work outside of them, but let's say they're coming in specifically for a winter season. And then it sounded like part of the worry was that if each of these 20 individuals just got a 4-month lease, then these units would sit vacant for months and would be unfilled until the next seasons, and we would be losing out on that money. And so we want these employers to be covering the times when this is empty, while providing them with secured housing for their group of people that are coming into work.
But, and I kind of agree with Ellen and Ashley, but maybe the compromise is if you're physically in the town of Telluride, you get an extra lottery.
With that.
And so we're giving a little bit of preference to something that we do versus,
You get a
opening up fairly. I mean, I think doing a little something extra for our businesses in our town would be good. And maybe that's the answer. I don't know.
I don't know if this is helpful context, and I have a text into Paul to see if this got executed, but with the VCA expansion, Mountain Village was considering a master lease program, which I think they did execute. Just for your awareness, they did limit it to brick and mortar businesses within the town of Mountain Village. It was a weighted lottery system, and the more employees you had, the less entries you have in the lottery system is how they structured it.
The
Just for
more employees you have, the less.
the less,
entry.
so it was more weighted towards small businesses than the larger businesses.
Oh,
Delaney?
Historically, it's not the small businesses who are looking for this opportunity. They have a smaller employee base. It is usually the larger employers who have such volume that they're looking for it. I believe that the underlying tenor of having a lottery gives that opportunity to small businesses as well if they are interested, and having a limitation on how many master leases any one business can have also kind of limits that. I just wanted you all to know it's rather rare that we get any. I guess it depends on how you define small, but anybody with less than 10 employees, I don't know that we have any lease history. I did some searching back in old tenant listings to kind of ascertain that. And I thought it was important also to just make this note for your frame of reference. As people stay longer in the boarding house, they come because they don't have anywhere else to stay. They're happy to live in the boarding house, and then they're there 4 years later and they're making tier E income. There's no income limitations at the boarding house. And though we are encouraging people to move on into a more appropriate unit, they aren't always taking that opportunity. And this was brought up a bit during the policy discussions last year. And I just wanted to reiterate that fact to all of you, because if we have people who are in tier A or B or even C, who don't have the opportunity to get into the boarding house, it's because rooms are being taken up for 3 years, 4 years by people who are making higher incomes. Just, I wanted to add that data for you.
Before I forget, I want to make sure Geneva is in support of the concept. She wanted me to pass that along since she's not here, of master leases.
I had a thought when we were talking about the limits to how many leases each business could have. If we lower the amount of units that we're going to put into the master lease program, do we also want to lower the limit on how many each business can have? Like if we only put, I'm just going to throw numbers out there. If we only put 5 units into the program, do we want a business to be able to have 3 of those?
No,
Yes,
I mean, and that was gonna be my point too. And I actually think that number should be lowered
like 2 feels.
regardless.
I thought 5 sounded too high.
No, not, it's 3 right
3.
now.
I thought it was 5.
You get 5 entries, maximum of 5
Entry.
entries into the lottery, but only 3 leases. But I think
Is it more fair to do a percentage?
Sorry, I totally misread that.
Right? Like what if someone got, let's say what we just said it was 3, and someone who had 20 employees got.
I think it will be hard to
Fifty.
calculate how many employees a business has because of the seasonal nature. At any one point in time, a business might have 50 employees and then they might have 20 employees, just kind of
fair.
depending on what time of year. So the way I structured this was to be the most administratively simple, but also fair to the businesses to make sure that no one business, I mean, and I'll name drop 2. I was thinking of Clark's while I was doing this because Clark's has a lot of employees in town. They also have a lot of seasonal employees. They need leases. We want to be able to give them master leases, but we don't want them to have all of our master leases. We want to make sure that there's a fair chance for all businesses. But proportionally, maybe they should be able to have more balls because they have a lot of employees, but still be capped at that 3 lease maximum. So that's the example business I was thinking of when I was putting this program together, while also giving other businesses that might only have as little as 1 employee, and maybe 5 employees, maybe 10 employees, also giving them a chance to have at least 1 entry in the lottery, maybe 2, depending on how many more employees they have. So it's meant to be proportional. So after the lottery is held, for every 5 employees that a business has, they get an entry up to a maximum of 4 entries. Ideally, once that lottery is drawn, we're proportionally represented. So Clark's might have more leases because they had more employees, but those smaller businesses also got a lease as well. So it was meant to be an accurate capture of housing employees proportionally for the business sizes.
I don't want to, so hypothetically, let's say we have 5 units in the program and Clark's, and a big business gets 3 of the leases. I'm worried about both the perception and the reality of us disproportionately helping one business more than the rest. And not only like ethically that situation, but also the feedback we would get of
Yeah.
like, "Oh, like clerk's got 3 of the leases." And so I think that I like the way you set up the lottery system. I kind of feel like the maximum should still, I would be in favor of lowering it to 2. And that already feels like a lot. for
Yeah,
giving you
so
2
if we
houses.
could, I think we're just jumping around a whole bunch right now. So if we could just go down the bullet list.
Perfect.
And that way, I think it will help make decision by decision, step by step. So let's start with the big question. How many units should be in this lottery? So staff proposed, I think based on vacancy numbers and what Delaney has heard from demand, staff proposed 10 double occupancy and 6 single occupancy rooms. What would you like that to be reduced to? Or would you like to keep those numbers but instruct staff to only have, let's say only half of those get rolled out this year, and then we roll out the other half next year? That's a possibility as well.
And can I just reiterate for ease for this discussion, there are 14 double occupancy units, 28 beds. And there are 18 single occupancy units, which are the higher demand units. I just wanted you to give you the numbers exact, so you have those.
So your idea was to give more of the double occupancy units to the businesses as master leases and fewer of the single occupancy.
I like
Because those
that,
are the
for
higher
sure.
demand.
If we only gave double occupancy to businesses.
I mean, I think some businesses would need this. I mean, housing is, it is a crisis.
But everyone
Um,
can still apply. It's just whether or not we want to allow a business to hold a master lease on that.
Right.
I don't know,
I mean,
just an idea.
to Ally's question, I would love to leave the numbers as staff had in the policy, but do a slower rollout with only half of those units being earmarked for this program for this year.
So 8 units lotteried this year. It would be 5 double and 3 single this year, and then the full 10 double and 6 single next year, assuming you don't want to change the program.
If we like that.
Yeah, we'll have feedback after this year. Maybe you want all of the boarding house to be lotteried. Maybe you want to roll back the whole program and do away with it, or change the numbers. So we could roll out 8 for a lottery this year and then do the full amount next year unless something changes.
And it's next year and the year after, because this
It's the
would not.
2-year, I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah. It would
So
not
that's,
be
that's why
2025.
like,
Just-
this is a 2-year commitment
Yeah.
for us.
I'm like not comfortable agreeing to rolling out the full amount in 2 years. I'm like not ready to say yes to that personally.
We have to discuss, we want to discuss it and have a work session on its success or lack thereof, and then make the decision. Would you be comfortable with that?
Yeah, like even the way you're proposing it right now feels like it's like happening, and I'm still on. I'm like have a little bit of skepticism that this is the right thing to do with our housing unit or housing program, and I like have some hesitancy, and I know Dan, I'm like
I'm with
seeing
all of
you.
Yeah. I'm
Yeah.
with you.
I can live with that.
Yeah, I definitely don't want to do anything more than pilot 1-year commitment with in a limited scope. Because I think that at the end of that time, you could very easily see and say, oh, this is a success from a certain lens. These businesses got this, the town collected more revenues, they're more stable. But I think where Ellen and I are the more philosophical side of our program, and making sure that the nuts and bolts of our policies align with that philosophical stance of supporting the workers and the people in the community first and foremost. So I think we come back from a year from now and, oh, data says it's great, keeps rolling forward, but that doesn't really address sort of, at least where I am having a lot of hesitancy around this.
Do we want to reduce this to 5 and 3 in writing then? Go ahead and reduce the numbers and reduce this down from a 2-year term to a 1-year term and make this a true pilot program, and then revisit this next year? And
I would do it this way. I can get on board with 5 and 3 as a pilot program, but I would do it as a lease term, I take your recommendation of 2 years as the smart way to go, but maybe the compromise there is after 1 year, the town can exercise an option to either keep that tenant in, the master lease tenant, or open it back up based on the success of the program. And that way you could, because I like the idea of 2 years. It's more of a guarantee of the revenue and it's less cumbersome for staff. And so maybe that's a good compromise. Like if everything's going great, why open those to lottery if we want to do 2 years originally? If the program isn't working, then we're not committed for that year two.
I mean, I feel like if the program isn't working, it kind of self-corrects because if we have a vacancy limit and like, all these limits around what you have to do with the unit, and if you violate any of those, you lose the lease. So I could actually like support the 2-year lease period because I do feel like there's enough like autocorrect written into this that if it's not working, the lease is terminated by the terms by our policies.
I like 2 years.
Yeah, I can support 2 years, but I like lowering the numbers. And then if we do want to expand it, expanding it isn't the default. It's a choice that we will make in the future if we want to expand the program. I think what I have a hard time with is like agreeing to kind of like, okay, we'll write those numbers and then, and then that's what our maximum will be eventually. Like, I'm not ready to agree to that maximum. And I think if we want to expand it, we should like actively make that choice and update the numbers. But I'm saying too much right now, but yeah, 5 and 3 2-year leases is what I could get behind. 75% occupancy over the term of the lease whenever they want to, like wherever in the year that it makes sense.
Can I ask a question? I think where you're leaning, I'm trying to keep notes along with Ally, is reducing by half the number that we would put into lottery. Devil's advocate. If we get through the lottery and we have allocated those 5 double rooms and 3 single rooms, and we are unsuccessful for more than 60 days to fill another 8 rooms with the general public, would the council be willing, and there is some language sort of written in here that talks about units that aren't allocated and being able to then allocate them to other people in the lottery. Like let's say you were drawn 6th in the lottery.
Why does it have to be a master lease? I guess that's my question. It's like, if you know that these employers have employees that need to be housed and they want this, why couldn't you just say, hey, tell your employee to come and sign up for this lease?
And we can, it goes back to the budgetary piece of this. And this is maybe where, if Hayden's wanting and feeling up to stepping in, the boarding house is in the Virginia Placer Enterprise Fund, which is the 18 apartments and 3 tiny homes. That is one budget, one enterprise fund. And the health of that enterprise fund is contingent on the health of the boarding house. To take us back to the budgetary discussions, we can do that. The master lease, to use some of the things Elena was just talking about, sorry, Councilperson Levin, is that there's more of a guarantee. We can go ahead and offer just a regular lease to a seasonal worker. They will be here for 4 months and then it will be empty again for 2 months and then it will be refilled, hopefully. So we can do that, absolutely. I think because, and I can't remember what section it is.
It's only, so we will only be able to execute master leases for 8 units.
Right.
Under the current language. We do not have authorization to do more than
Okay.
that.
I
Yeah.
just wanted to ask that.
Elaine, can you help me reconcile that though? Because this is where it feels two sides at once with, if we have people staying in the boarding house too long, it is part of where this conversation also originated, is if we have people who are just staying in the boarding house for multiple years, does that not accomplish the same things through the budgetary lens?
Yes.
And so that's where I again have skepticism of the whole idea, is if we are having that anyways, and these are qualified people, the people we effectively want to be housing one way or another, what is the need for this?
To fill the extra months, to
issue-
get
yeah,
more
that-
money and to make it a little easier on staff, right?
But
I mean,
but if people are staying in the boarding house for years, there isn't turnover, that they just pay over off season then as well.
see, I think that might be a bigger discussion and also adding a limit on the tiers. So you don't have someone in there making so much money that it defeats what I think is the purpose. But that's a council discussion to say, who cares what they make if they fall under the tier, and maybe that's okay. I don't know. But I think that's a different, I think we need to me, maybe that's a different discussion for a different time. And we just have to try to figure out, do we want to do a master lease pilot program, which is where we're leaning towards, and just to see how it goes. I mean, I like, testing something, right? If it doesn't work, then we don't do it. But it shows some support to the businesses and it houses a local. And if that helps us a little bit by staff time and financially, I don't see, if it's a pilot, what the downside is.
I think I'll jump in just a little bit. I think understanding the enterprise fund and the options presented in front of council, the understood goals from council to staff is to keep the boarding house for seasonality purposes. Understanding that value and goal, we're looking at the master lease as a potential tool to help with that goal. If council has a separate goal, while still looking at this from the fiduciary standpoint of allowing long-term rentals to help offset seasonality and broadening the boarding house purpose to that, then we can look at that as a tool as well. So I think I think there's two tools. So you're presenting a tool, which is kind of the current tool, and staff is trying to rebalance the values that were communicated to them through this master lease program as a tool for more of the seasonality. Does that paint that picture a little bit better of kind of where this master lease program purpose is coming from, aside from the realities of the boarding house and how we can also be looking at that lease structure?
Ashley?
I know, Dan, you don't think we ever agree, but I am like really like not
That's it.
comfy. I don't love this master lease thing, but the part that I think is a little frustrating with all of this is that it sounds like we created a problem for ourselves in that we built a boarding house with the intention of it being for seasonal workers, but then didn't actually figure out how that was fiscally going to work, because seasonal workers would mean that they're going to be leaving for parts of the year and it's going to be vacant. So I feel like we've kind of like got ourselves into like a little bit of like the snake eating its own tail of like the intention of this property. We want it to be for seasonality. It can't be financially attainable if it has seasonal workers that are gone for a portion of the year. Because of that, I would be comfortable with the lower number, half of what's being proposed. I think if we're going to do it for 2 years, let's do it for 2 years. I think that I don't want to put in a mechanism that says like, and then on this day it doubles. I want us to like really decide that that's what we want to do. And I think that like we have to, going forward with our future projects, really understand if something has an intended purpose, how will that affect its financial operations? Because I feel like that's the issue that we're sitting in right now.
Right. And so I think, we'll open it up to the public, but I think that the reality is, what is our philosophy as a council? Do we want to reel it in a little bit like we discussed and Ashley summarized, cut the number of units in half, a 2-year lease, and call it a pilot program? Or are we against this and don't want to do it? I think that let's just get there first, because we don't need to discuss the rest of the questions if this isn't part of it. But staff has brought us something that we think can solve a problem. So I'll start and just say I'm in favor of the reduced number as a pilot to see if it works. And knowing that it's, like Ashley says, it's not perfect. What does everybody else think? Yes to that or no to that? It's pretty simple.
Yes.
Live with it.
Yes.
Okay. So if you look at the list, I think that basically, we talk, I mean, you can run down the list. I don't need to do that for you.
Yeah. I think we've answered 2 questions so far. So we
Right.
have the number of units that are going to be in this pilot program, and we know that there will be for 2-year lease terms. However, staff will come before you next year and give you an update on the program as to whether it's not working and we just need to do away with it. It's working great. We suggest increasing the number. We'll come to you with an update next year, and maybe you do want to increase the number at that time. Maybe you don't want to touch the program. But let's look at for the next year ahead. Let's try to outline what this pilot program will look like. So the next question I need answered is which businesses should qualify for a master lease? So we discussed expanding it to organizations and governmental organizations as well, I think. So if the county wants to enter, they can also do so. Keep in mind, the county has a lot of employees. So if you want an employee cap, that would be someone that you would be precluding from a lottery if you do put an employee cap. The way I defined local business or qualified local business is an entity with a Telluride business license employing at least one person in a presence required employment position. But this is where I need feedback from you. Do you want to increase that to maybe a minimum of 5 people that they employ in order to be eligible for a lottery? What other parameters would you like to see here, if any? I did hear brick and mortar in town. So there are many other ways we could define this.
And then I would think about, for us is, since it is a pilot, how deep in the weeds do we want to get on the restrictions? I still think the compromise of if you're operating in the town of Telluride, that's where your business address is, whether it's brick and mortar or not, maybe you get an extra lottery entry, and we give a little bit of, I don't know if preference is the right word, but a little more opportunity for the people who are supporting the town of Telluride more financially.
I personally would like to keep this as broad as possible for the same reasons that Teddy said. I also feel like we should see which businesses come to us asking for this. So I think that for these first 2 years or whatever, the first year, however we're figuring this out, but I would like for it to be as broad as possible. I do think that giving maybe an additional point for businesses that are physically located in the town of Telluride without precluding surrounding area qualifying businesses would be my preference, but let's see what everyone else says.
Yeah.
I'd like to keep it broad, and I think especially for just keeping it easy to implement for staff, just keep the set of qualifications the same as the rest of the policy standards.
I can see it both ways. I think it becomes a philosophical question to me that if we allow for a broad, employment standards in our other housing units, then like philosophically, why should we change that for this? Like if we've decided that that is the philosophy behind the Telluride housing programs, I have a hard time justifying why it should be different for the boarding house. I understand that the master leases are with the businesses, so that's where I can like see it on the other side too, is we really want to like support town of Telluride businesses. My holdup about the brick and mortar part of it is that there are a lot of businesses that do a lot of work here that maybe don't have a brick and mortar. I'm actually going to use me as an example. I don't know if your wedding planning business has a brick and mortar, but that feels like it should qualify as a local business. So sorry to call you out like that, but that's the example I was
You have a
thinking of in my
business
head.
license.
I do have a business license.
But if we're saying like there's this like
Yeah.
extra something for brick and mortar, I don't know if the brick and mortar is the threshold to make it a like local business that should get the extra support, even though like I do kind of agree with that.
And if it's a pilot versus a permanent program, is it just more beneficial to be more broad and see what the data suggests so we can make our policies different 2 years from now?
I mean, I can be supportive because it is a pilot of keeping it broad. I mean, I think, to the philosophical thought process, I mean, there has been some, I would say, fairly extensive pressure and conversations from larger employees trying to ask the town of Telluride to adjust their housing policies to suit their particular needs. And I want to avoid, that's probably one of the things I'm trying to put stop gaps on or bumpers on so that we don't run into larger problems or public concern about what changes we're making to our housing programs. So that I think overarchingly is my concern. But I think if we are going to do this for a lower number of units and it's only going to be a pilot program. I'm happy with it being broad. I think with the caveat, not to go to another bullet point, that like we drop the number of units that a business can have to one.
Oh, one.
That's a question coming up.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it's the next question, but I think like
Yeah.
I can be okay with it being broader as long as we are not, as long as we are keeping some parameters in there.
I'm going to fight for 2. I think the reduction is, but would you like us to wrap up the first one first before we go to the?
I think I hear consensus that the existing definition of qualified local business is okay, so long as we expand that to organizations and local governments as well. But having the employee, so long as they have one person who is a present required employee, they will qualify for at least one entry into the lottery. We'll get more into the lottery point system here in a little bit. We can talk about maybe if they do have brick and mortar presence, we allow them another entry, but it sounds like the definition itself is okay so long as we expand it to nonprofits and governments. Is that,
And I would also
Yep.
suggest special districts because there's some
Yeah.
that
we'll capture it all.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's fine. I think broad is good on this one.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I think broad is, we good with just a broad one and not getting an extra lottery point.
Fine.
I'm good with that. Dan?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So you're good on that point?
Good on that point.
Right.
So
Then I'll leak into the next one, which
Yep.
was how many should, can they get? Especially if we reduce it, I think 3 is too many. I like 2 because I go flip side. Like if you're the school, if you're Clark's, 2 is still a small percentage of what you're trying to accomplish for some pretty important businesses in town. Not to discredit others, but versus an organization that may have 10 people that gets 1. There's such a disparity that I think 2 is okay. I'll go with whatever council wants, though. It doesn't.
I think too, because some of this is also going to self-select. Who are the people who are going to go through this effort and time and expense, because you're going to be paying for a unit that will effectively be sitting empty some of the time. It's the larger businesses that have a little bit more need. And so I think that I think to Delaney's earlier point, the odds that these really small micro businesses, 1 or 2 employees, take that expense and time to do this is less likely the more I think about it. And so leaving this a little broader at 2, I think is better and means that this will actually be utilized if we're trying to do it.
If they're a micro business too, the chances that they need something like this are probably pretty slim.
And would want the financial burden of
Yeah,
this
of
too.
like, if it's on
Yeah.
an empty place that they're gonna be on the hook for, I don't think that again, it seems like a situation that we're trying to figure out that I don't think is gonna happen.
Mina, are you good with 2?
Sure.
I like
Good with 2? Okay.
I think there's 2 points I want to make real quickly here, and Delaney can probably speak to at least one of them. We might be overstating the need for small businesses of these master leases. There's not a lot of demand for these from 20, 30, 40 different businesses. There is demand for these for several units from a few select businesses in town that have seasonal employees. You can probably think of who I'm referring to. So I think the 2 is good. I think that's a good cap for the number of units that we've now proposed for the program. However, you'll see under 702.2A2, where I talk about that cap, 2 master leases. However, let's say after the lottery is drawn, let's say one business had several entries and they got their 2 units, and that's great. But then we didn't fill all of the units. So we didn't have as much demand as we thought we would. If we have leftover units and those businesses had extra balls that were drawn, they could get more than 2 leases. So if there is a lot of demand, you're limited to 2 units. There's not a lot of demand for these units, you could get more than 2 units. However, the lease for that period would be limited to 1 year in case there was another business a year later that wanted to enter that year's lottery.
I'm good with that because, we want to fill the units. And if we weren't reduced in number, then maybe I'd have issue. But with us cutting the numbers in half and everyone else had the opportunity and didn't take it, why fill it?
Yeah, and the pilot program will also allow us to present data to you next year about what actual demand is for entering this kind of lottery.
Yeah, like I don't want to get to a situation where like we built a boarding house and like a quarter of the units are being held by one business. Like that's where like, and that's an extreme, but like that's where I am kind of
I don't
treading
think that's an
lightly.
extreme. I think that's I mean, that's my concern.
Yeah, yeah. So
Dream, it's just,
I mean, that's also why I just wanted to lower the limit in general and not even allow for the full 16 that was proposed until we decide we want that. I mean, what if hypothetically, what if like two businesses ended up with 4 units each? Are we like, are we okay with that?
short term as a pilot, I think so. And then we adjust the program to what's the highest and best use for it in mostly in 1 year, because once you get more than 2, it's only a year. And this way we get to test the program still financially. It's full, it's at least housing somebody. I know it's not ideal, but I mean, we got to figure out if this is, if what we've all come up with is viable. And I'd rather do that than have them sit empty. I mean, filling it is, I think, better. I'm not saying you wouldn't fill it with a general member of the public, but if we've already cut the number in half, it's not a big number if 1 or 2 entities take the majority. It's not, again, not ideal.
I mean,
I agree with you, but it's just, it's a pilot and
Yeah.
okay, the pilot didn't work because 2 businesses took them all. So we're not doing it anymore.
I mean, and then it goes back to the philosophy of like, would we rather deal with this solution to the financial, shortfall of the idea of the boarding house, or just allow for people to live in there for a long time? I think that's where like I keep kind of pushing like,
And that's what Dan had brought
Yeah.
up earlier. And I think that if that's something we want to do, that's part of the reason of getting this data for a year. And then we may have this discussion a year from now and say, you know what? Open the boarding house up just like every other project. The seasonality didn't work financially and it didn't work structurally, and the master lease weren't fair. We're redoing the whole, right? Instead of having that discussion now, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think we're
Prepared.
for
That's right.
that discussion right now.
That's correct. Yeah. Right. And I don't want it, right? Because we're not prepared. I don't want to have it, right? Just,
Yeah.
we shrunk the numbers. We further restricted it than what was presented. I'm okay taking some risks that again are not ideal, but it's going to help us nail down on what is the future of seasonal type housing for the town of Telluride. And is it so uber successful, this becomes part of what we want to do more of, or it's not really working, so let's not do it. And this is part of that, like a bigger picture.
And I just want to jump in and provide a little bit more context on the narrative of the initial modeling of the project. The initial modeling of the project was also always based on seasonality, but the length and gaps in that seasonality, I think, are what have led us to this conversation that was.
And if the businesses speak by not acting to fulfill a master lease, then we know this is not a good idea. So let's just try to fill it and then adjust as necessary.
Okay.
Thoughts? Are we good with that?
yeah.
I mean,
I can live with it.
yeah, I mean, again, I'm only good with it because it goes back to the pilot word, right? It's a test and and this
Can we
test,
get a definition of a pilot, everybody?
it gives us,
With a little tap, right?
it gives us more of an opportunity to try something and being more fiscally responsible in that effort. Does that give you enough direction?
Absolutely, it does.
Okay.
So next bullet point is how many lottery entries should each business get? And what are the limits on bonus entries and maximum number of entries? So again, I modeled this. It's meant to be fairly simple, but I modeled this based off of the 16 units that we anticipated being in the program. Now we're down to 8. The way this would work is at each qualified local business, so long as you qualify, you get 1 entry. If you have more employees, you get more entries. But remember, there is a total number of units that you could even offer you. So right now, if you have 5 entries, great. You're still only going to get 2 leases, assuming you're even drawn to win in the lottery. So if there are any comments there about how you would like to structure additional entries, maximum entries. I put one additional entry for every 5 employees up to a maximum of 4. So if you have 20 employees, you'll get 4 additional entries, which is 5 total. If you have 100 employees, you still only get those 5 total.
I mean, my only comment would be like, should we? Well, I think the question is like, what size businesses are we really trying to accommodate here? And is like, a business with 15 employees who could get 3 units, like, is that, I mean, we limited it to 2, but if they don't all get filled, like that, I wonder if like we should have an extra entry for every 10 full-time employees in addition, like to kind of distribute, oh wait, Delaney, but yeah.
So if you remember from prior lotteries that we have, every ball has to be drawn. So
Mhm.
the more balls that are in the thing, you have to draw them all, even if there's 350. Most people leave after they've had their first ball drawn. I would probably recommend having the cutoff instead of at 5 employees, maybe have it be at 10 employees, at least as it increases. Maybe 1 entry for everybody. If you have more than 5 employees, you get 1 additional entry, and then maybe have it be by tens or more.
Ooh, that's a lot.
So you'd have.
Yeah.
No,
40
but what's still with the
employees?
maximum number
Yeah.
Yeah,
of
so
5.
like, it
Okay.
would go like 1 ball for 1 employee, 2 balls for 10 employees, 3 balls for 20 employees.
Instead of 5, 10, and 15, because that's really
'Cause then-
focusing in on the small
Then a
businesses. which-
business, yeah, a business with 25 employees would have 5 balls, right?
And I
Yeah.
doubt Tiffany has this off the top of her head, but I do know that there's fewer and fewer businesses that fall into those categories. What our average categories of employee
Large.
counts.
Yeah.
I don't know what our average business license employee count is, but I'm sure it's around like the 10s or 20s.
Yeah, I would think the average, so the restaurants are the biggest that are usually over 10. And I would say our average is probably like 7.
Yeah.
But we would be allowing special districts. Here's like, my thought is like, okay, so we would allow the school district then to do this. The school district obviously has a lot, but the most the school district would get
Is
would be
5.
5.
Mhm.
I like the idea of 2 at 10, like you would have 2 entries at 10 and then making it 10 before you get your next ball, maximum of 5.
So like
What Delaney
1
said.
employee, 1 ball, 10 employees, 2 balls.
1 employee, 1 ball.
Just 1 entry if you qualify.
Yeah, you qualify.
Yeah.
And then it was at 5, you get another one.
Sure, because that does capture
Okay.
that small business, so it does
Yeah.
get.
So your second ball at 5, your third ball at 10, your fourth ball at 20, your fifth ball at 30.
Or even bigger expansions. I'm just offering that up because the word proportionality has come up a few times for larger businesses. And if so most businesses will have 2 entries, but then there's only a few that might have 5 entries.
I can't imagine
guess-
there's a lot of businesses that have more than 30, or even organizations that are larger than 30.
I guess my thing is like, if somebody has 5 employees, they could get 2 of these units, and that doesn't feel like the right distribution of the resource.
Then just.
Better just go 1
leave
and
it at
10.
That's
And-
what I suggested, because that's what I think
That's
is
fine.
good, but I want to, I don't want to bulldoze this bullet point.
I'm good with 10s.
Feel 10 increments of 10 feel good.
No, I agree. I see the logic in what you're saying. I think it's fine. It's fine.
That's fine.
Okay.
Okay, so the break-even point is 40 employees then. So if you have more than 40 employees, whether you have 40 or whether you have 400, you're getting the same chance. But anything beneath that might be getting 1 ball, 2 ball, 3 ball, 4 balls. But regardless, maximum of 4 additional for 5 total. Are we still on board with that? Okay, are there any other considerations that might warrant, other than employee count? Are there any other considerations that might warrant additional entries? I kept it at just employee count, but we discussed maybe brick and mortar presence. I don't know how you would want to define that.
I
There
think
could be other parameters.
I think our broad philosophy and the other bullet points should continue through this one. We need more data, who applied, and then we
Okay.
can figure it out in the future.
Okay,
Because the village did it, 2 wrongs don't make a right, and we should
Great.
let them know. Thank you.
Okay, so it sounds like we're good with the lottery point system. Again, this is a
Yep.
pilot program. We're going to be collecting data throughout the whole time. We can definitely tweak it for next year, assuming we want to keep it, or any year after. So we will keep track of other ways that we think might be a fair method of implementing this program. So that takes care of that bullet point. So the next one, I think I probably already know the answer here, but it was a question worth asking. Are businesses allowed to terminate a sublease if an employee quits? And I'm seeing at least one head shake, two head
I said
shake.
No,
Okay.
you can rent, they don't have to work for you.
Exactly.
So that they have to, if you're going to get this benefit, you got to deal with it.
Yeah.
I think that's fair.
So, and it serves that purpose of providing stable housing for employees and not making sure that they're not beholden to any one employer, and have that ability to leave an employer if they deem necessary. But they still get to keep their current lease. However, they could always be non-renewed under that sublease, but at least they have secure housing for the term of their lease. So are we consensus there? Okay. So the last one, I think we already answered the first question. And I believe I probably already know the answer to the next one as well. So the term of the lease is going to be a maximum of 2 years. Should units go back into a lottery at the end of the term, or are they allowed to be relet to the same business without going back to the lottery? I think the answer to this is going to be they have to go back to the lottery. We structured this program in a way that if you are a business and you get a master lease, great, but you can only count on that for 2 years. So this is not meant to be something that a business 30 years down the line, 20 years down the line still has a unit unless they continue to win that through the lottery. What we imagine here is a little bit of turnover. That way we're advantaging several businesses over time. So I saw this as more of all units go back to a lottery. If you win a unit through that lottery the next year, we'll renew your lease then. But if you don't get a unit through the lottery, then it will turn over to another business.
And then do we assign the units? Like, for example, if you won the lottery and you get your 2 years and then you won the last space of the last lottery
Mhm.
entry you won, it would be easier if you just kept the same unit, wouldn't it? And do you have that
I think that's
ability to do
probably
that?
how we would do it. If let's say a business wins number one in the lottery who doesn't already have a lease, and the second lottery winner is someone who does already have a lease, that number one can't kick out an existing number two. Otherwise, we'll have a unit turn. There's more cost. They get to keep the unit they already have. We renew that unit because they won the lottery. Number one gets to choose any other unit that's not already leased.
Are we allowing because we've got the two different types of units, are we I'm just curious how the lottery will work. So will it just be that there are this many units and 8 balls are gonna get picked
Mhm.
and it's gonna be like, you just are gonna get what we give you? Or are they gonna say, I am only interested in a single occupancy, or I'm only interested in a double?
So number
occupancy?"
one will get to choose either a single or a double occupancy. So there's not separate lotteries. It's just all units, same lottery. If you're number one and you're a business, and let's say you want a single occupancy, you get to choose which single occupancy unit you want. If instead you want a double occupancy, that's what you get to choose.
Clarifying statement. They aren't necessarily gonna get to pick which unit they want. We're not gonna do like unit showing.
It's the,
Right,
yeah,
Right, yeah,
yeah.
just so that if anyone's listening, they don't get to hand pick.
Yeah.
We good on that?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, so I have a few provisions in here for subleases. It's more just so I can outline what those subleases will, the provisions that we're going to have to look for. We don't draft the sublease, but we do approve them. I don't think there's any questions there unless you have any questions, but there's nothing in my memo that I need answers for. So that takes care of what I needed to know about the lottery, unless you can think of anything else you would like to talk about for master leases before we roll this program out.
We're good.
Okay, thank you. I know that was a lot to go through,
And-
but we have some ideas for next time, assuming we want to carry this forward. But again, staff will come back in about a year and present some data and let you know if it's a success or a failure, and we can go from there.
Great. So this would end our conversation amongst council for the boarding house.
Yes, for master leases at the boarding house.
Great.
Mhm.
So before we move on to the other bullet points, maybe I'll do public comment, just this block, and then the remainder blocks for the last one. So it doesn't look like there's anybody in the room for public comment. Tiffany, are there any hands raised? Okay, great. Keep rolling.
Okay, this next one, this is more of a Delaney point. I'll let her talk about it, but we're back to the main topics. This is the second major change in the policies that we are recommending, and this is increasing the minimum tier for rent at Voodoo from tier C up to tier D.
You may recall that with Voodoo, it is governed by a grant that was received from DOLA, from the state of Colorado. And the rent tiers, the way that they are broken out now, there are no units that are below tier D. Therefore, it made the most sense as we move forward with all of these other proposed changes collectively, and knowing that we already have a basement tier at C for Sunnyside, B for Virginia Placer, that the lowest tier at Voodoo matches what's already in place based on the grant language, and that's tier D.
And I'm just going to jump in a step further. Based off of the initial modeling directed by council, the average AMI between the tiers was 120 AMI, which is what tier D is. So it also follows that initial intent and direction from council for this project.
So lower tiers, if you're in that lower AMI, you wouldn't be able to qualify to rent there.
So, and the language is already existing throughout the policies document. Someone who is in tier A, B, or C, if they meet the minimum income standard, is also allowed to rent there, but it is then their choice to rent a unit that is at a tier that is higher than what, frankly, staff would recommend that they take. So it's not that they're prohibited from renting there. It's if they still meet the minimum income standard, then they could.
It's technically unaffordable for them, but if they really wanted, say, Voodoo, and you have a tier B income, so long as you meet the 2.5 times minimum income requirement, 2 times minimum income requirement, you could still sign a lease there, just knowing that it's going to cost quite a bit to live there.
50%.
Mm-hmm.
And while it's in this packet, in our initial budget packet, when we were showing the different rents as they currently are versus what it would look like at D, structured from the initial intention modeling of this, where we have some units at 120, some at 150, so on and so forth. People are in units at that AMI, shifting Voodoo to the policies and creating the basement of D. A number of the current people living in Voodoo actually go down to a tier D with a reduction in rent. So that there is an impact to Voodoo.
That would be
with
the
the
same with a lower floor.
Yeah,
A
with
lower floor
yep,
would account potentially more.
right. Yeah, 100% it would. But and then balancing the initial financial modeling of the project and that intention.
At the last discussion, I called out that I felt that this was inconsistent with comments from the rest of council around the policies, where the goal was to have the ability for any income level to live in any project. I still feel that this is inconsistent with that previous direction from the rest of council. I have my own thoughts on the rest of these policies, as you all know. But I just wanted to put that comment out there that I still think this is being inconsistent.
I don't disagree with your comment. I think it's the financial reality that we're in with Voodoo is we built that project with the intent for it to serve a more middle income group of people, and our policies changed. And so we're kind of trying to fit Voodoo into policies that didn't exist when Voodoo was conceived. And so there is a little bit of an inconsistency. And I just want to say yes. And I think that we right now have to work within the system that we're in and adjust it to make it work. And this seems like the right way to do that.
And I think I will also because I agree with you, Dan, that this policy does not, that there is inconsistency between the two. But I do also believe that is one of the reasons that we have discussed revisiting the rental policies immediately versus waiting till the end of the 2-year timeframe. So I think that this is, to me, a stopgap. I think we need to do this because I think this is I think we need to go back to the original intent that Voodoo was built for. And I think that hopefully that through that process, we'll re-clarify and bring things into alignment.
I agree with what everyone's saying. Ashley?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have anything to add. I echo Dan's frustrations with this and feel like, yeah, that there, you know, I think that this is again, just kind of an example of where we are building something with a philosophy and an intent in mind that then maybe doesn't align with the financial reality of where we sit.
The philosophy shifted. So there wasn't a philosophy and intention.
I know,
Yeah.
I'm saying the philosophy that we came up with the idea that we wanted mixed levels of income to be able to occupy different spaces. I agree with that sentiment. I'm frustrated that, you know, we again didn't really fully draw out to where we are today, now having to go back on that. And, you know, anyway, yeah, it's fine. I understand. I agree with what everyone has said.
Not enough direction.
Yeah, it sounds like we have, can you just nod if we have consensus on this one to approve? Okay,
Yeah.
sounds like we do. These next two, as I said before, are more, these are cleanup items. So first, removing the mental health worker reserved unit from the Voodoo policies. We specifically call out reserved units, just again, in the interest of transparency, so the public knows, oh, wait, there's 30 units here. Why are there only 29 available on this document or something? So we try to be as transparent as possible when there are reserved units. Earlier this year, you did authorize removal of that Voodoo reserved unit, and so now we're just removing that from the policies. Do we have consensus there? Okay.
Can I add a piece of interesting and hopefully happy news? The direction was also that we gave that priority to someone who fit that mold of the mental health worker situation. And we have actually in another building, if it came to that, and we actually have 2 potential candidates that we've been speaking with about this. So that allocation, if you will, is likely to occur based on council direction at another building. I thought that was kind of a happy news item.
Thank
Cool.
you.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
This next one, while it is a cleanup item, I think there's a little bit of explanation needed, especially for the public that might be listening. So updating the AMI tables, you might remember that when we adopted these policies last year, we intentionally lagged adoption of the new AMI numbers. So what that means is AMI is usually released in April or May of each year, but we will not put it in place in our policies for purposes of tiering a household until January of the following year. So numbers released, say, in April of 2025 don't take effect until January of 2026. So what we have done is we have updated these AMI tables that will take effect in January 2026. What that means, though, is that we are aware of these numbers starting in April 2025. Unfortunately for this year, a 9% jump, which has led to these conversations about reducing the multipliers, which we're going to get to next. But that gives us about 8 months or so to plan for these changes and see how these AMI jumps are going to impact rents for our tenants, which is, again, why we're here. So what this means, though, for updating the policies, we'll go ahead and put in the 2025 AMI numbers. Again, they will not take effect until January 2026. Anyone who signs a lease through the end of the year will be placed in a tier based on last year's AMI numbers. Anyone who signs a lease after January 1st of 2026 will be placed in a tier based on the 2025 AMI numbers. So this is not, it's not cleanup. This is, if we were not doing this right now in front of town council and THA board, this is something that staff is authorized to do administratively. This is something that has to occur every year. But I just wanted to give a little bit of background as to what's happening there, why the numbers are jumping so much. We do not calculate AMI. And then, of course, when they will become effective for anyone listening. This next bullet point, are there any questions there? We'll get more into AMI here in the next few bullet points, but I wanted to allow questions now. Okay. So the next one is our third big change, which is amending the rental affordability multiplier from 27% down to 25% at Shandoka and from 30% down to 27% for all other projects. You've already had conversations about this. Delaney will provide even more background. But the major, the idea behind this is because AMIs jumped so much this year, a 9% increase, this decrease is going to help offset some of that increase to AMI.
I know that this was done because of the AMI jump, but I also just wanted to say that I think our projects should have lower multipliers, and I hope that these percentages are something we can keep. Although I know the reason we brought them into the conversation was the AMI jump, I think this feels more palatable and more appropriate to acknowledge the other cost of living expenses in a place like Telluride. I just wanted to say that.
And I'll just add for just the comment of to keep, that was why it was staff's recommendation to look at the multiplier rather than AMI, because the multiplier sustains throughout the policies where the AMI adjusts annually based off of what we receive from the state. So.
Good with it? Questions?
To bring us back, sorry, just one thought to ask staff about and share. So, as you guys may or may not know, all leases on Voodoo are in a holdover until January 1. But meaning with this change that all of those tenants would be then subject to that AMI change. Are lease renewals happening on schedule at the rest of town rental projects currently?
Yes. The consistency with those is that we still see people's rent going down. Whereas at Voodoo, we were concerned about the rents going up. And with these, if adopted policy changes, it was an effort for us and tenants to have less paperwork and only do things in one fell swoop and do them in January. We do have 2 households that have expressed discrete concerns about waiting until January, and we will work with them to go ahead and renew their lease. And then they will then get the letter shortly thereafter, as all tenants will, if and when these policy amendments are adopted, to then reduce rent with a lease amendment as of January 1st.
When you say lease amendment, what would that be? What would that look like?
It's like a 1-pager that's 2-sided, and we typically use those regularly now for a change of tenant. If somebody has a roommate situation and they change their roommates, we issue a lease amendment that addresses that change of tenant form. However, when the town attorney's office, Ally, recreated and updated that form for us, there are 3 different sections, I believe, and you can choose. And one of them has to do with the rent amount being changed, and it would be, it's a checkbox for
I think,
various
yeah, I
things.
think your actual question is, so the difference is we're not going to be requiring the tenants to provide all of their income information again to get re-verified or any of those things.
They're
We
gonna
will
use
taking the information and data from the original
But-
lease, but adjusting the
Based
amount, adjusting the rent starting on January 1st.
So I can give a more, now that I
Yeah.
hear what the question I believe is. Voodoo lease renewal packets went out with a deadline in August for lease renewals on November 1st. As we began these discussions, more around the budget pieces, we decided that this was going to be a very burdensome thing for Voodoo tenants. We put a 1-month holdover in place. We will still use the information from the August renewal packets and not alter that.
But not the AMI tiers. The AMI levels is what's changing, which is the basis for the rent tiers. That would be changed to it. And that's what I want consistency on, is because if other projects, if you live in Shandoka and your lease renewed in November, you got a lease renewal packet in August, then you're still using the 2024 AMI data instead of, which would be inconsistent with this, which now all Voodoo residents are having to hold over until the next year when there is that jump, instead of being allowed to renew on their normal schedule.
So I think this question is even more nuanced for Voodoo. And as a resident there, I'm sure this is partly a personal question. So Voodoo, we were required by the state to use the 2025 numbers to requalify everyone at Voodoo, even though our policies state differently. So the Voodoo residents actually had a leg up on all other property tenants because the 9% increase to AMI actually brought some people down in their AMI tier already.
Some people, but the rest of people saw that 9% increase.
The increases in the rent, the increase to the AMI, the way I phrase it to people is it actually gives tenants more buying power because it expanded and increased the high end number of the AMI. And if you didn't get a 9% raise, if you only got a 4% raise, you actually may have gone down a tier. So Voodoo tenants actually had a leg up over all of the other properties.
But tiers are 20% ranges of AMI. And so some may have, but the majority probably didn't.
But they didn't go up.
But the tier itself went up, which is again the basis for the rent. How would that not be an increase in rent?
It's not an increase because it's really confusing. AMI is the average median income.
Area median income.
So what we're looking at is like, that means that like, basically there were probably some high producers that pulled this number up. Not that we saw a bunch of
I'm
people
not
at lower,
I know what a median, you know.
but I'm just saying, it's like, so it's not a direct correlation. What we did was like, if you made 69 and that was at the very top of 90%, then that got pulled up to 75. Unless you saw the exact same increase in your rent, then you're going to see a decrease in your overall percentage.
The rent is based off of AMI tiers, where it's 100 to 120, 80 to 100, et cetera, as you all know. And so when that 100% AMI year over year increases 9%, well, it's still 100% AMI in 2024 and 2025, even though they're different real numbers. But it is the real number that is the basis of the rent calculation.
Right, I think,
And so, yeah, okay, if Delaney is correct, and I'm sure she is, I hadn't realized that every unit in Voodoo, even the non-grant assisted ones, because there are two separate categories at Voodoo, are required under the state grant to follow that change of AMI tiers. I'm just asking for consistency between projects. That's what I'm trying to talk about, is that it has felt interesting that my impression was that every other rental project was being able to renew on time and on schedule, which I think is a fair thing to the tenants. Is you have a lease, you know when your lease is ending, you know when you're going to be renewing it. That's what I think we all want and agree upon. But being asked to then pay that same rent in order for this change to come down the pipeline that would increase everyone's rent, no matter what. If, you know, all other factors staying the same, there are extenuating factors. We all know and agree about that. That's what I'm trying to address.
I think the issue, like with what you just said, is everyone's rent isn't increasing. The AMI,
Factors staying the same. I know there's individual cases where, yes, you move it to a different tier.
well, you just said everyone's rent is increasing, and I think that was a mistake.
All factors staying the same.
All factors staying the
Got
same.
So broad.
No, all factors staying the same, your rent would go
One-
down.
One at a time.
If your income is static, right? It's right here. Your
But you might not
income
move to a
tier.
different tier. You might not move to a different tier.
Okay, fine. And yes, and we're lowering the multiplier. That's why we're lowering the multiplier.
Across all projects for everybody. So I'm
Yeah.
just asking,
So because I think I can rephrase this a little bit. So right now, staffs, and we're going a little bit aside from the policies, but more on how we're implementing this. So our recommendation on implementation was we have provided anyone that has not renewed their lease within this year, like Voodoo in particular, where a lot of that next year renewals would have started previously. They're on a holdover until what we said January 1st, when these policies are going to be implemented. That is when we would be renewing those leases. Again, Voodoo is very specific because it was a new project, so everyone's leases are October, more or less. that they would be held over until January 1st. So they're being held over on these old policies till January 1st instead of being allotted from an October move-in date to have these policies to be able to renew at the renewal date on October. The difference is, would we allow them to renew on policies that wouldn't start right now to staff recommendation until January 1st? Or are we going to be considering this policy taking place for some of these tenants earlier in that so that they have the opportunity to renew under the new guidelines and not be on this holdover lease? Is this kind of the situation that the picture we're painting? For other projects, people have renewed their leases because people started last January. It's not the same as Voodoo. We don't, there are some individuals that had an October lease renewal. That are those people on holdover leases, or do we renew them under the guidelines? I think
You're
that's,
speaking about all the other properties,
Mhm.
not
yep.
Voodoo is the only property with a grouping of leases that we put on a holdover lease. When we anticipated that the 9% increase, which again, according to the language in the covenant, we're supposed to be using the current AMI numbers for that project. When it came to light that everybody's rents were going to potentially increase 9%, staff made a decision and spoke to management to do a 1-month holdover lease until we could get better answers from council on how to proceed with this. The reason that we are continuing holdover leases through the end of the year is honestly and simply to streamline our processes, which we are also being asked to do on a regular
Yeah.
basis, to diminish extra paperwork for us and tenants,
But-
knowing that those 20 households are going to have the extra
The
paperwork.
pointed question is, at other buildings, let's say someone had an October lease.
Yes,
Are they currently on a holdover
No.
lease? So
unless
their
they
lease,
requested.
so their lease was renewed under the current guidelines and under the 2025 AMI,
Correct.
2024.
2024
Yeah.
AMI.
But we're using them in 2025. Yes, this gets very confusing with all the different years.
I mean, it sounds like we don't have a great with the Voodoo leases. It makes the most, if we have to use the 2025 numbers based on the grant, that is what it is. And there's not a whole lot we can do to work around that. And I think if you want projects to all be treated fairly, that would mean putting everyone on holdover leases. But I don't think that's
Certainly
right
not what
either.
I'm suggesting.
Yeah,
I'm asking for consistency, but to be.
We would love
Well,
to be able to have.
Yeah,
consistency.
but I think we don't have a lot of options with Voodoo. So like that is what it is. But I don't think we should adjust how we're addressing other people's leases because
that's
Voodoo has this like specific.
Yeah, that's another discussion for another
Yeah.
time, right? I mean, we're not prepared for that discussion either. Mian?
I think, to the philosophy about consistency, we certainly could have been consistent if we had wanted to, but staff and the manager's office and others were very concerned that if we were consistent in that policy, the rents would have increased and created financial hardship for those individuals. And so there was a decision made to put a temporary stopgap into analyze and address the situation so that our community members were not negatively affected by these policies. And so I want to just level set that that was why this was done. And I actually want to take a second and thank staff for doing that and ensuring that the people that are living and working here are being set up for success and being able to be given the chance to thrive. And I understand that this is maybe creating a discord in the policy itself and the application thereof, but I would always rather look to what is going to actually benefit our community members. And I would rather put that as a priority versus applying a policy consistency that would negatively affect one particular group or building. I mean, and I think I understand. I mean, I think like that's where the the challenge comes in. Like, I mean, obviously I know a lot of people that live in Voodoo as well. I've also heard that there is frustration that these leases weren't signed, but what could have happened is that they would have been forced to sign leases that were, again, beyond the means that they feel is affordable. And so again, thank you to staff for once again prioritizing the affordability of our housing for our community members.
Nothing more. We can move on. Thank you.
Do you have enough direction?
Yep.
Okay.
So the next bullet point is the last one that we need to discuss, because the last one is the very last bullet point is another cleanup item. So this next one is inserting the unit amenities multiplier, which has been utilized by staff, but was not previously placed in the policies. Again, we're putting this in here for full transparency of how rent is calculated. The unit amenities multiplier is a multiplier that applies within certain projects when there is a significant difference between two units of maybe the same bedroom count, but they have different amenities. So say there is a 3-bedroom with 1 bath versus a 3-bedroom with 3 bathrooms or 2 bathrooms. Those units should not be charged the same amount of rent. Rent should be very similar, but maybe rent is 3% more at the nicer unit or the bigger unit or the unit that has the extra bathroom than it is for just the 3-bed, 1-bath. So the way this table is presented is very similar to how it was previously presented at one of the budget meetings. There's only 3 projects for which this unit amenities multiplier applies, and that is at Shandoka, except for Building F, Virginia Placer, and Voodoo. So you'll see that within each of those 3 projects, we have set forth the unit types, where, so just for instance, at Virginia Placer, we have tiny homes and we have studios. Technically, each are both a 1-bedroom unit. Studios, the multiplier is 1. So whatever that affordability multiplier, whatever that target rental rate comes to, that's our baseline. So we see the studio as the 100%. However, the tiny home has less to offer because the tiny homes are only about 196 square feet, which is more than 50% smaller than the studios at Virginia Placer. So maybe a tiny home should not be charged the same amount of rent as, say, a studio at Virginia Placer. So instead, we apply a multiplier of 0.97, which is 97% of what rent would otherwise be for a studio at Virginia Placer. Conversely, we also have 2-bed, 1-baths at Virginia Placer and 2-bed, 2-baths at Virginia Placer. There should maybe be a little bit extra for that extra bathroom. So we see the 2-bed, 1-bath as the baseline, so that will be at 100%. But the extra bathroom, which is itself a benefit, also adds another 80 square feet for those 2-bed, 2-baths. So the multiplier there will be 1.03. So rent will be 3% higher for a bedroom that has 2-bed, 2-baths versus a 2-bed, 1-bath within Virginia Placer. And that's the mechanism by which we apply for each of these different amenities at both Shandoka and Voodoo. So you'll see at Voodoo, we have 3-bed, 1-bath. There's only 1 unit of those. And then we have a 3-bed, 2-bath. So because there's significantly more 3-bed, 2-baths at Voodoo, we see that one as the baseline. But there is this one outlier of this 3-bed, 1-bath unit, which is 200 square feet smaller than the 3-bed, 2-bath. So that one will be 97% instead of 100% of the targeted rent. So if there's any questions there about how we have allocated this multiplier to different unit types, if you disagree with how we've allocated this and which units we set as the baseline, we would like to hear that feedback.
I think this is a great idea because when we started the new policies, I feel like this was kind of not really addressed, and I think it's good that we're addressing it now. I've been like doing the math on the multipliers, and I can like get behind this. I do wonder if like, like how much of an amenity is a loft? Is it a 5%? Like, I don't know. I think that's where like it's hard to know what the right number is. And I'm like, I'll support this math, but I could also see the argument of those amenities being like increasingly or decreasingly valued. Like, I don't know if like the tiny home versus the studio, but I don't know like what how to put a value on these things, I guess is what I'm getting at. But I think it's good that we are acknowledging that different units have different amenities and benefits and making sure that that's addressed in how we come up with pricing.
I think it's good just to at least have a policy written out so
Yeah.
that people can see it. Like, I agree with Elena, it's really difficult to figure out what the like how to determine that, but at least you can say it's 3% up, it's 3% down, it's 5% up, whatever. So. Yes, fine.
Any other comments? Okay. What we will do now is take any public comment. Does not appear anyone in the room is here for public comment. Tiffany, do you have a hand raised? There are no other hands raised. Are you good with concluding the work session?
I am. I think I have all the direction I need.
Okay,
Mhm.
great.
Okay.
Then that brings us to agenda item 3A, public hearing items. Public hearing on and consideration of a joint resolution of the Town Council of the Town of Telluride, Colorado, and the Telluride Housing Authority amending the Telluride employee rental housing policies. So who,
I think there's
would go
resolution and.
right to any discussion, any further presentation, or do you want us to, you want me to ask right for a motion?
The presentation is the exact same. Discussion is the exact same. I think we just open it up for public comment if there is any. And if there is, we take it. If not, we close public comment and we can adopt the joint resolution.
Great. So we'll go in order. First, is there any further discussion from council? Seeing none, there's nobody in the room for public comment on this item? Is there anyone that in the last 30 seconds has raised their hands online, Tiffany? Great. Seeing that, I would entertain a motion.
I move to approve the amendments to the Telluride employee rental housing policies as presented with the following modifications or additional changes to section 707.2. A maximum of 5 double occupancy and 3 single occupancy rooms may be set aside for execution of a master lease with a qualified local business for each event. Section A1.II, 1 additional entry is awarded for every 10 full-time employees of the qualified local business to a maximum of 3 additional entries. Point III, the maximum number of entries allowed for any qualified business is 4. Point A2, no qualified business may hold more than 2 master leases at one time.
Ally, is that good?
Yep, that's good.
Okay. We have a motion from me, and do we have
I'll second,
Hold on.
but then we can wait for discussion.
Okay.
we have a second from Dan?
I think you said 3
3.
additional entries and I believe you all direct 4.
I thought it was 4 total.
5.
5 total.
Oh, apologies. I can withdraw my.
You just make an
No,
amendment.
friendly amendment. I'll make a friendly amendment that changes the number of lottery entries to
What's wrong?
4 additional entries for a total of 5.
Do you accept your friendly amendment?
Accepted.
We need to address that we only want it to go for 2 years, like that the program won't renew after 2 years.
No, I think you can always take the program back next year
Okay.
and we'll finish out the lease term. I would, however, recommend another friendly amendment just to expand the qualified business to qualified organizations and governmental organizations.
I propose a friendly amendment to expand the definition from just qualified businesses to include organizations. Sorry, was there another piece of
Government.
and government entities? Thank you.
Great. Do you accept that friendly amendment?
Should we
What?
do something?
Did you do the 75% occupancy over the term of the lease?
That's not in the policies. That's something I'll put into the lease.
Okay.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, some of it is staff policy
Yeah.
versus the motion.
Friendly amendment.
From Dan.
And do you re-second it, Dan, with the friendly amendment?
But he proposed
You
it.
propose it, so you have to technically do that or not? I don't
I
know,
don't
but,
believe I do, but I'll look legal. No,
okay, great. Okay, Mian, how do you vote? Dan, how do you vote?
Dan, yes.
Elena, yes.
Ashley, yes.
Teddy, yes, it is approved unanimously. Thank you very much for your hard work on that. That brings us to agenda item number 4, Telluride Housing Authority. Do I have a motion to go out of town council into Telluride Housing Authority?
So moved.
We have a motion from Dan. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Elena. Dan, how do you vote?
And yes.
Ashley, yes. I was my second.
I said second.
Oh, did we say it at the same
Yeah,
time?
yeah,
Yeah.
we did.
Oh,
I thought he was gonna pick you because you were louder.
oh, sorry. I didn't even hear you. That's why I didn't know that you had seconded. All right, continue.
worked.
It's because we don't have anything blocking us.
Oh, sorry.
So we are, Dan voted yes. Elena, how do you vote?
Helena, yes.
Yes.
Ashley, yes.
And Teddy, yes, it is approved unanimously to go into Telluride Housing Authority. By any chance, did Geneva jump online? Okay, no problem. We can, Elena, do you want to run it? Do you want,
Dan's the vice
Dan?
chair.
Dan, you're the vice chair? Do you want
Happy
to
to
run
run
it?
it. We can be pretty brief, I'm
Because he was
sure.
gone too, right?
Right.
Okay, all right, great.
Okay, I call to order this special Telluride Housing Authority meeting. The time is 12:02 PM on October 28th, 2025. In presence at the meeting are Ellen 11, Teddy Erico, me and Fee, Ashley Story von Sprecken, and myself, Dan Enright. We'll do new business A, public hearing on and consideration of a joint resolution of the Town Council of the Town of Telluride, Colorado, and the Telluride Housing Authority amending the Telluride employee rental housing policies. We have Ally Slayton and Delaney Tapson here to present.
Thank you. So this is the exact same item that we just discussed in town council. The memo is the same, the resolution is the same, it is a joint resolution. So at this time, I would just ask that the public hearing be opened, comment taken, comment closed, any proposed changes to the policies recommended, and a motion considered for approval of the resolution.
Okay. In that case, I'll open the public hearing for the matter at hand. The amendments to the policy guide, or the policies. Is there anybody in the room for public comment? Seeing none. Tiffany, is there anybody online with their hand raised? Thank you. Any more discussion amongst the housing authority? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion.
That's me. I deleted it and I was excited to be done. I move to approve the amendments to the Telluride employee rental housing policies as presented with the following modifications or additional changes. To 707.2, a maximum of 5 double occupancy and 3 single occupancy rooms may be set aside for the execution of a master lease with a qualified local business for each unit. Section A1I, each qualified local I1 additional entry is awarded for every 10 full-time employees of the qualified local business or organization or governmental entity to a maximum of 4 additional entries. The maximum number of entries allowed for each qualified local business, governmental entity or organization is 5. And point A2, no qualified business may hold more than 2 master leases at one time. I'm gonna leave it with that. I'm gonna leave it with that right now.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion from me and a second from Teddy. Any more discussion? Seeing none, Mian, how do you vote?
Ian, yes.
Teddy, yes.
Elena, yes.
Ashley, yes.
Dan, yes. Motion passes unanimously. There is no other business, so with that, we'll adjourn this special meeting of the Telluride Housing Authority by unanimous consent and return to the town council. Thank you.
Great, Dan, thank you very much. Great job. That brings us to the next agenda item, Town of Telluride Special Town Council meeting, and that is adjournment.
Before we adjourn, I just want to tie a bow on all of this quickly for the community. So that now that council has passed, and we're about to adjourn at this point, the pieces of the rental housing policies that had an impact on the budget. So we had a discussion on our budget, what led to this. For the community, as part of the 2026 goals and objectives, we will continue the rental housing policy discussion. With that, staff will look to implement January 1st, and we will be doing lease amendments to maintain people's current lease dates. And then they will be renewing at that annual amount. We will have information sessions for the public. So we'll be holding a work session for the public on November 11th. And that is going to be in today's news release that's going to be going out. We'll be providing FAQs for the public and available for questions. I also just want to make it clear to the public that While the average rent is going to be seeing a decrease, it does not necessarily mean everyone is going to see a decrease. It very just depends on their current situations. If council wants more data, Hayden is prepared for that. But I just wanted to wrap a bow before we adjourned for the community.
Great. Zoe, thank you very much. Any further questions on that? Then we will go back to the adjournment by mutual consent. Thanks, everybody, for your time today with this special meeting. Everybody have a wonderful day and happy Halloween.